Hey, welcome to Warchant TV, and we have one of our favorites on here. And I'm not talking just about Ira Schoffel, of course, managing editor on my other side there, but Bryant McFadden, great player at Florida State, obviously for several years there. NFL great, has a ring to prove it there, right? B-Mac, you don't have the ring on right now?
No. I got two to prove it. I got two.
Okay, we believe you. We know. We saw it. We know you did that. You got the trophies. You got the rings. And also, man, you've been just doing bang up and, with media and broadcasting. You see a lot of videos. So you got a really successful podcast. Why don't you tell us about your podcast and if people want to be able to listen to it? How do they do that?
Well, thank you, Gene and Ira, for allowing me to be on with you guys tonight. It's always a pleasure talking with you guys and, speaking about the media career. Of course, I'm doing some things with CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports, and along with covering the game professionally and collegiately, I also created a podcast called All Things Covered with my cousin Patrick Peterson, former All-Pro corner with the Arizona Cardinals. So me and Pat decided to team up to take some of our covering skills from the football field, but to the media platform. And we've been having a blast. We usually drop one episode weekly. Every Wednesday morning we drop an episode. We also have a YouTube page as well. Just visit youtube.com. / All Things Covered. You can check us out on YouTube, and please subscribe to the YouTube page. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star rating. We provide quality content, and most importantly, we're entertaining. We're not boring.
And I'll tell you about that. We've got the YouTube channel too, and so you hit that subscribe button here as well, and it's free. So Why not? You got nothing to lose, but you get some great football coverage and everything else. And Ira, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead there.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, man, your guys' podcast is taking over the world, because what's cool about it is not only do you have you and Patrick, who both have plenty of things to say and smart guys, played a ton of football, have great experience and knowledge, but then you bring on guests who are willing to tell you guys things that they would never tell me or tell Gene. And so you guys are breaking news on that thing. I mean, it's like every time you guys do one, it seems like I'm seeing headlines that other people are writing about what you guys are talking about. Did you envision that was what it was going to become?
Well, we wanted to provide a platform for athletes, current athletes that, they're comfortable. They're extremely comfortable. What I call is barbershop talk. Sometimes when you go into the barbershop, you're a little more comfortable in that atmosphere than any other atmosphere that you may partake in weekly. And that's something that we want to provide. And it's funny you mentioned that, Ira, because a lot of times when we have these guests on, they might give us a heads up like, we don't want to talk about this particular story or player or situation. And then when we get on and we hit the record button, they just letting it fly. You know what I mean? So they kind of make our job easy. But I'm happy that we have that relatability to be able to get these guys to be so comfortable and just talk about whatever it is they have on their mind at that given time. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to provide a lot of national headlines, not just for CBS, but it's a great feeling when ESPN picks up your stories and they put it on their social media platform or they run it on their daily, weekly shows. When the NFL Network, when NBC, when New York Times, some of these major publications throughout our country, when they pick up something from our podcast that, we haven't even been in existence for a full year, it's been a pleasure. And we continue to thrive off of that and continue to provide quality guests, number one, with quality information. And we always want people to walk away from learning something, either from myself or Pat P or from the guests that we have on as well. A lot of these guests do other things outside of the game that they play professionally. So we love for them to be able to, open up a little bit about what else they do outside of being a big time athlete.
I want to ask one more, and I was going to switch it back to Gene. Gene and I both interviewed you when you were coming up out of high school, and then when you were playing at Florida State. So you've always been a guy who's a good speaker, always a good quote, a good guy to talk to before and after games. But did you think broadcasting was going to be something you went into? When did you decide that was a career you might want to pursue?
You know what? I've always had the love of sports in me. That's why I used to enjoy talking to you guys, because that gave me an opportunity to express myself outside of covering wide receivers. And when I played in Pittsburgh, it's funny, I had a radio show my rookie year, and then my second year I had like a little TV show called B-Mac Corner, right, where I brought on my teammates and we just had fun. It wasn't something that I wanted to get involved in, but I was just doing it because it was another opportunity for people to see me outside of wearing my helmet. But when I started to realize my career was coming to an end, I wanted to do something that I love, because I felt like doing something that I love would never feel like work. You know what I mean? It would never feel like a grind. I would never get tired of the situation. And my first love was playing football. So knowing that my football career was coming to an end, I wanted to do something that provided me the same energy that the game of football provided me. And it was talking football, talking sports, you know, helping people learn, helping people understand the game better, coaching better, playing better. So I got opportunities, and I just started from the ground up. I mean, I started volunteering my time in South Florida when I was living in South Florida, the local CBS station, NBC, working for free, doing things that many people thought I probably shouldn't be doing because I was a former NFL player, but I was okay in doing that. I didn't have an issue trying to earn it from the ground up, and then got an opportunity, then another opportunity, and then got the opportunity with CBS where I'm currently working, and just been enjoying the process. So, you know, me personally, it's all about, you know, chopping wood. And when you knock down one tree, you find another tree. And keep chopping wood until you clear the entire forest. And then you build up with that open land, and then find another patch of trees to continue to chop at. You never get complacent that way, in my opinion.
Well, BMAC, I think that's one thing we admire, that you've kind of done this you've done it the hard way, but the right way. You've done it from the ground up and you've built something special, and you've gotten so good at what you do now. And speaking of that, I want to bring up the signing day. You moderated the signing day forum for Florida State this year, and there was a really neat show that you put on. I guess, how did that come about? And that's a little bit of a different setting for you, but how did you like doing that?
I loved it when they mentioned it to me. I said, as long as we follow the safety protocols when it related to COVID, I'm okay in doing so. And I was able to come back. You know, one thing about me, I love Florida State, as you guys can see. Anytime I'm talking Florida State, I want to make sure I represent Florida State to the fullest. And when they approached me with the idea, I was like, yeah, no question. Just give me a list of the guys so I can kind of do my own homework, because I don't think it's fair for me to talk a certain topic and not be aware about what I'm talking about, because some people can tell when you don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? So I wanted to do my homework. I wanted to study the guys that we potentially would sign for sure, even the guys that we wouldn't sign. Number one, I love football, so it's like I'm watching tape. That's okay. So I wanted to study these players. I wanted the people that were there at the stadium to learn something about each guy. So that made my job so important. Not to mention to be able to make these coaches who really don't know me feel comfortable in being around me. You know what I mean? Because I wanted them to feel comfortable so they can give us their best, and I wanted the fans to feel comfortable so I can always keep their ears. You know, when you have a boring speaker, you're gonna lose listeners. You know what I mean? That's just a given. When I was in school, some of the boring class, the boring class had boring teachers. And I thought about it. If I'm going to be talking about something, I can't be boring, because I always lose eyes. I will always lose ears. So I just wanted to be entertaining and make people feel comfortable, and I enjoyed it. And then I was able to do the second signing day, which was a few weeks ago, when I was in Tampa covering the Super Bowl. That was virtually, and I was able to get on Jameis Winston and Anquan Johnson, and we had a blast doing so as well. So I love the fact that Florida State, they're able to incorporate alum like myself along with other people to be a part of the current crop of guys, and just kind of emphasize and talk about some of the things that we see as former players. And then you guys talk about what you see as well. And just a quality collaboration, I think, and being able to get the fans, the boosters hyped up about certain player, why I believe this player could be good, you know, what this player does well, what things he can improve on. Because like I say, anytime you're watching or you're listening to something and you understand what they're saying, you're more in tune to continue to watch and listen, and that's something that I wanted to provide.
And you, as Gene was saying, like, one of the cool things about you is there's a lot of former athletes that decide when they get done with their playing career, they decide like they want to be broadcasters, or they want to go on TV and capitalize on that reputation and the name they built. But a lot of times they're not necessarily willing to do what you did, like go back and work for free or just try to get the experience. So first of all, I wanted to compliment you for that. I think that's really, it's cool to see. And I think it's part of your success. The other thing is you've really improved. I mean, like when you and Travis were doing your guys' podcast, from those podcasts, you and Travis Johnson, your teammate at FSU, to what you're doing now, you've grown as a broadcaster. Like, do you notice that? Have you worked at it? Did you listen to yourself? Like, how have you grown as a broadcaster?
Yes, I noticed it. Just being able to listen to things that I did years back when I first got started to where I am now, and it's still a growing process. I still have a lot of steps I need to continue to take. But yeah, I noticed it because I always wanted to be able to be as close to perfection as possible. Granted, I would never reach that because we will always fall short of perfection because we're just, we're human. That's part of our DNA. But I wanted to progress. Like Coach Andrew used to tell us all the time. It's funny because I've always go back to talking about things he used to tell us. Get 2% better every day. During spring, he's always emphasized, did you get 2% better? 2% might not seem like it's a lot, but it is. Because a lot of people don't get 1% better. Better yet, 2%. So when I first got started, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I know the game. So I had two issues, right? Knowing the game, but being able to simplify the game to make my aunt understand what I'm talking about. Like, I had to realize that the people who are watching and listening to me may never been in a locker room or a huddle. Maybe never really been around the game of football like you guys have been around, right? So they might not understand certain things when I start talking football talk. So being able to simplify the game that my grandma or my granddad could understand it. If I can do that, I did my job. You know what I mean? Both of my grandmas are dead now, but if they were living and they were 80 plus years old, walk away and say, you know what, grandson, I really learned something. I didn't know you were supposed to contain the football with the outside shoulder and the outside foot. I didn't know that. I did my job. So that was one of the first things I wanted to do, being able to simplify the game. Secondly, talking about the game and being able to speak and enunciate everything that I say for everyone to understand what I'm saying. Because I'm a Southern guy. So sometimes when I talk, I have a Southern little twang that will follow me, right? And a lot of people who are from where I'm from, they may understand it. But a lot of people who may tune in and watch me or listen to me, maybe from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and be like, what did he just say? Especially when I get excited, I talk a little faster, more passionate. So that Southern twang will always surface. So I had to, see some speech coaches that really helped me. You know what I mean? And it wasn't about changing the dynamics of how I spoke, but making sure you take your time to still have that same Southern twang, but you're able to emphasize and enunciate everything that everyone would be able to understand you. That was the biggest process for me, because it's hard for me sometimes to take the energy out of something when I'm super geeked about what I'm talking about. And that's the gift and the curse, because when people see the passion, they know you actually love what you're talking about. But sometimes that passion can make you go into overdrive and you get too fired up and you're like, okay, he looked like he said a lot of important stuff, but I really didn't understand everything that he was saying. So those are the two major things that I need to improve on: simplifying the game, simplifying the football talk, and being able to say things the right way every given time. And sometimes you still may mess up, but it's a part of your personality. I think, everyone that talks about the game of football, everyone that talks about sports, they have their own personality that it's okay to showcase here and there, because that makes you an individual. And sometimes we don't have enough individuals covering the game as we should, because they try to do everything the right way by the letter of the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we've really enjoyed it, B-Mac. I know you do a lot of NFL. I want to ask you an NFL question before we get to some FSU stuff, but it relates to Florida State. One of the guys you had on that you mentioned was Jameis Winston. And this year, anybody who followed New Orleans knows when Drew Brees got hurt. I was shocked as anybody that Taysom Hill was a starter. I really thought that was going to be Jameis' shot there. But, if Brees does retire, and it looks like there's a good chance he will, I don't know what you think on that. Do you think Jameis, will he get that shot, you think, in New Orleans? And then if so, will this be a real good opportunity for him to really show what we saw in college? And that was a unique dude who could do so many things and had a presence on the field. And I don't think we saw a little bit in Tampa, but he obviously made too many mistakes. Can we see that Jameis Winston maybe in New Orleans this year?
Yeah, I really hope so. I'm rooting for Jameis. And I might be a bit biased because of our Florida State ties, but I don't care. You know what I mean? But like you said, you don't win the Heisman Award by accident. You don't become the first overall selected player by accident. You actually have some talent. You actually can ball. You're a baller. Granted, we didn't see the achievements or the success that we thought we would see in Tampa, but that's okay. He still made a lot of money. He still did some real good things, and he still has an opportunity to show his worth in the National Football League. And the best thing that I'm excited about for Jameis in New Orleans, if he's able to get that opportunity, I think he's going to take it by storm. And the reason why I say that, guys, is because when you talked about Jameis at Florida State, Jameis was an unbelievable player at Florida State because it seemed like he was always above the game, right? He was 2 steps ahead of defensives that he was facing. He just knew the game. But one thing that actually helped his growth and his progress was being able to have a well-sound coach in his ear, in his back pocket in Jimbo. And I think that's the same relationship he kind of has in New Orleans right now with Sean Payton. The same mentality. Jimbo coaches his quarterbacks super hard, probably harder than any other position on the football field. Sean Payton is basically the same like coach. You know what I mean? He coaches the quarterback position real hard. The expectations are high, and he's involved with them daily. And I think because of that relationship, similar to what he had at Florida State when we saw James at his best, could be the same thing in New Orleans, given the opportunity. And Taysom Hill, I understand when you talk about the game of football, NFL-wise, the business sometimes trumps the playmaking ability. You know what I mean? When you pay a guy a nice paycheck, you want to see that investment on the football field. That's just a given. We understand that. You're paying Taysom Hill, you gave him 2 years, $20+ million, and something happened to Drew, and he's not the starting quarterback. Why did you pay this man almost quarterback-like money to not start in front of a guy who was getting league minimum? You know what I mean? From the business side standpoint, it made sense. Now going into this year, especially be able to sign Jameis back, because they're probably going to sign him back, for a short-term deal or something like that. Now you put Jameis in there, you got a baller at a low deal contract-wise, and he's still in his peak years. He can flourish there. So I think the long-term answer at the quarterback position between those two guys, Taysom Hill, is Jameis Winston. Number one, because of the experience. He's played more football at the quarterback position than Taysom Hill, and he's a better quarterback. Taysom Hill is a better football player. I don't think you would argue that. When you talk about just pure quarterback, Jameis is the best quarterback.
Man, I've got a couple of questions about some FSU topics. But first, I want to ask you, since we're on the NFL, I want to ask you, when you talked about the last signing day thing, the meet the transfers thing you guys did with Anquan, and Anquan was a great player in college, but he also battled some injuries. He had to come back from the ACL. The passing game wasn't where it needed to be. The offense, Coach Jeff Bowden kind of took a step back. Did you have any idea back then that Anquan was going to be what Anquan became in the NFL? Because, I mean, people now he's talked about as a Hall of Fame guy. I don't know if the people outside the team knew that when he was playing for Florida State. Did you guys already feel he was that kind of guy?
Oh, no question, because Quan had a serious work ethic. Number one, he loved the game of football, and he displayed that week in and week out on the practice field. So, for us, when you look at the secondary guys, the corners specifically, we saw him every day in practice, and we knew what he provided and what he brought to the game of football, which was passion, the attitude. You know what I mean? Quan didn't play the game like most wide receivers played the game. He played the game like a football player. He played the game like a defender playing offense. And the thing about Quan, like you said, he could have done big things. He could have been like a Bolitnikov Award winner if he was healthy. Quan could have done big things at the quarterback position if he was healthy. He was just a pure football player. So we saw the best years that Quan had to offer in the NFL because he was more healthy than he was at FSU. And it's crazy because I think if Quan was healthy throughout his collegiate career, Quan could have done astronomical things, you know what I mean, from multiple positions, to say the least. But he was able to hit that stride at the most important time in his career, which was as a professional. And like you said, his name will be in that conversation sooner than later. When you talk about Hall of Fame like players, his name will be in that conversation. Speaking
of Quan, I got to bring this up too, because to me it's one of the most impressive feats by any player, and that's the Walter Payton Man of the Year, and he's one of the guys to win that. By the way, little brag here, 3 FSU players have won it, none at Florida or Miami have. Just, I guess, the quality of character that he had. Did you see that early on? It's one thing to see talent. It's one thing to see a guy that just an immense character that he has.
Yeah, he's just a good guy. I mean, it's hard to not like someone who's just a great individual. Some people are good football players. Some people are good reporters. But everybody, they're not good people. You know what I mean? And when you have good people around you, you want to be around them. You're okay in doing so. You guys know how it is. You've been adults for a long time. You can work with someone because they're good at their job, but he's not a good person. Outside of being in these working walls, I don't want to be around this player. I don't want to be around this employee, to say the least. You know what I mean? So Quan he was a good guy. It wasn't just about being a good football player. He was a good guy. So it was easy to be around him, and also it's easy to see some of the things that he's been able to accomplish, not in between the lines, things that are off the field related. So it just go hand in hand, and I think there's a lot of players that are good players but bad individuals. You know what I'm saying? Like and you tolerate him because he's great at what he do, but he's not a good high character. Is something that he doesn't have. He's a low character guy. Quan was a high character guy, and he was the same individual whenever you saw him. You know, very, very forthcoming, welcoming, polite. But on the football field, all that politeness was thrown out of the window.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of defensive backs would share that opinion that had to cover him.
Yeah, exactly.
When man, so you and most of the guys that played at Florida State still bleed garnet and gold for years and years and years, to different levels. Sometimes they move on and it's not a focal point of their life. You have always, man, just you really do breathe it, eat it. You'll text us after games when things aren't going well. I was curious, how do you watch FSU football games? Or do you need to be by yourself? Do you want to be by other people? Do you watch them live all the time or sometimes taped? What's the BMAC viewing experience for FSU football?
If I'm watching FSU, and if the people that are around me, if they're not former players of FSU, I can't watch it with them. It's funny because when I was working with 120 Sports, who is now known as Stadium Sports, and on Saturdays I would be in the green room watching games in between my hits or whatever the case may be, watching Florida State. It was crazy. It was like I never watched a game with a guy like this because I was so invested. Number one, I see certain things, I might call it out before it actually happens, or just the passion, just alone. So I can't watch Florida State in a sport. You know how some people go to sports bars to watch games? Number one, I don't like doing that if I'm really trying to watch a game because I hate hearing so many different opinions. Oh, what are they doing? Oh, they should have did this or they should have did that. I'm like, no, just stop, okay? But then when I'm watching Florida State, I either need to be by myself, or if I'm watching it, I need to be watching it with someone who's heavily invested into the program like I am, because I get to a whole nother level. Usually when I watch Florida State, regardless, win, lose, or draw, I walk away not being able to have a sound voice because I'm going through the roof. And I'm gonna tell you this much: I know I have a problem when it comes to watching Florida State, because anytime I see Florida State getting ready to come on the football field through the tunnel, home games or away games, I get chills. Like, I still get chills when I hear that war chant. I was at the Super Bowl in Tampa, right? And it was at Raymond James Stadium. And I was getting ready to do my hits right outside the stadium, literally outside, so I can hear everything that was going on in the stadium. When, you know, Kansas City, the Chiefs, they play the war chant. They don't call it the war chant, but, you know, that's what I call it, the war chant. And when I heard the war chant, I got chills. I know it wasn't Florida State's band, but I got chills hearing the war chant, and, like, I still get chills through my body. So watching Florida State is, whoo, in the last few years, it's been tough. Like, listen, my blood pressure had to be, it was a roller coaster. It was high, it was low. It was high, it was low. The same can be said for you guys. You know, you can watch every Florida State game as well. But yeah, it's been tough the last few years, but I can tell you this much: I'm excited about the future because I feel like we were at the bottom. The only place you can go is up, right? And if we take small steps going upward, I'm okay in doing so. But I can't watch Florida State football with people because they're gonna look at me crazy. They're gonna be like, "What's wrong with this guy?" So I usually sit at home if I'm able to be home, or if I'm working, I need to be by myself. You know what I mean? Because you guys are gonna see a different BMAC than what you're accustomed to seeing.
BMAC, you gave me a great idea to stream you live during games. That'd be just fantastic. We put you right next to the. We'd have to censor a lot.
It might be must-see TV because they'd be like, "Man, I never seen this guy like this. I never seen someone watch the game like this." Like, yo, it's crazy. It's intense.
You got an invite to the man cave anytime, just so I can see you go crazy. Put all the breakables away. We'll hide them for that. Speaking of that, you brought up this year's team, BMAC, and just obviously Florida State fans did not get what they wanted to last year. Nobody did that was connected with the program. It was the worst season really since the mid-'70s. But there are some signs of optimism. You went through yourself those transfers. And I wrote a story about, really, I think they might have had the best transfer class in the country. Forget the recruiting class, but those transfers are unbelievable at positions of need. How much adding those guys to the equation, most of the team back from last year, and then we discussed off the year, having a whole off season to actually get in the weight room, the off season drills, spring practice, all that. How much better can this team really improve in 1 year?
They should be much improved. They should be a better ball club on all three levels, offensively, defensively, and special teams wise. Number one, the continuity, right? We didn't see the same continuity last year because of the pandemic. There were a lot of teams that had issues. Now, you gave me a nice stat, Gene, about Power 5 teams that had new staffs. There were only one staff that had a winning record. That says a lot. So I think because of the uncertainty, because of the adversities last year, it was an ugly year, but it's almost like, okay, you can see why, to say the least, to some degree, about the struggles. This year, now, when you factor in having a full recruiting class to be able to dissect, granted, you didn't get a chance to see some of these players in person on campus, but you were able to do your homework, you know what I mean? Being able to be with the kids. Hopefully you can get a full spring, right? That's important. Hopefully they can get a full spring along with some of these veteran transfers that you talked about that can help some of the younger guys and lead by example. It's huge. So I'm not one of these, individuals who don't look at the realistic standpoint and saying, yeah, Florida State should instantly be a playoff team. No, you got to crawl before you can walk. And I feel like we should be more competitive. We should be able to be a competitive team in the ACC this year. I mean, seeing the struggles that we've seen in the last few years, in teams that we never considered to be any type of threat handle us as of late, that shouldn't be. I mean, you know who should be a threat to you if you Florida State in the ACC, and you know who should not be a threat. And I don't expect to see it happen overnight, but what I would like to see happen with this team that will put a smile on my face is competitive football, improving week to week. Not the same mistakes, the mental lapse, the physical lapse, improving week to week, putting a better product on the football field week in and week out compared to what we've seen in the last few years. And I think some of these veteran players, the transfers, should be able to help us out tremendously. And then it's up to the coaches. This is a very, very pivotal year for this staff, in my opinion, because like I said, I'm not saying they had an excuse for how bad the team played, but the bad play is not as highly emphasized because of the pandemic. Heck, you had people that were struggling at their 9 to 5 because of the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Everybody had some issues throughout this pandemic. That's just a given. This was a life or death situation. So mentally, it was hard to focus. I mean, there are a lot of people who probably were great at their job before the pandemic happened that struggled through the pandemic because you had a lot on your plate. And I understand that. That's the humane side of what we should look at. But this year, no, we got to see improvement. And I think we will be able to see improvement because I think all parties involved with this program, they feel more comfortable than what they did last year. Because I can tell you this much: if I was a player and I had to play through what these guys went through last year, I would be uncomfortable. I would be nervous. You know what I mean? Because of the unknown.
Let me ask you this: when you look at college football overall, people will say that you can't play defense the way you guys did when you were at Florida State. You're not going to post shutouts. You look at the scoring numbers across college football with the rules changes and everything else. What's a good game defensively now? Like when you watch college football now, like what's the goal? Because again, you just don't see people shutting people out the way that was not common, but the great defenses did back in the day. That doesn't seem like it's even possible. Alabama's given up 35 points in games. What's possible?
I think, me personally, I'm a believer in never allowing your tongue to overshadow who you are as an individual. Like, the tongue is very, very powerful. And if you feel like I can't stop this offense from scoring 20 points, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. And Mickey, as you tell us all the time, you know why you missed that tackle? You know why? Because you didn't want to tackle him. Like, what do you mean, coach? What you mean I didn't want? I wanted to tackle the player. No, you didn't, because if you wanted to tackle him, you would have tackled him. He wanted it better than you wanted it. And at the time, it didn't really make sense. We're like, I wanted to tackle him. But then when you watch tape, you see hesitation, right? You see your foot on the gas, and when you go to make contact, you take your foot off the gas. Now you give him an opportunity to have more power than you, right? So it's almost like, yeah, it's a different game, and you have to adjust. The game of college football has changed dramatically. The same can be said for NFL, but you have to adjust. So to answer your question, what's good defensive play? Number one, to have your offense score more than offense. That's the number one goal. And every game is not going to be a pretty game. right? You might not have a shutout. You might not be able to only allow 10 points, 13 points. But when we walk away, we better have more points than them, than their offense. And now you have something to build upon. See, when I played at Florida State, we had goals, right? Could not allow over 300 yards total offense. We were supposed to have 3 sacks, right? We were supposed to force 2 turnovers, and we could not allow the opposing offense to score more than 16.5 points or something like that, 16 points, 15.5 points. If we didn't reach those goals, all those goals, we were going to run. So I think because of the difference of game plans and schemes, you got to change the numbers a little bit, but have a goal sheet for these guys. Back then when I played, 300 was a number. Now you might need to say 380. You know what I mean? 350. It used to be 17, 16 points. Now you might need to say 19, 20. They can't score more than 19 to 20. But have a goal set for the defense, and most importantly, have your offense score more than their offense, right? So that means if our offense only score 14 points, they better score 13. Because the ultimate goal is to win. Mike Tomlin used to tell us in Pittsburgh, and I love, reiterating things that I've heard from my coaches, because I can tell you this much. I feel like I was fortunate when you look at the coaches that I've been around: Bobby Bowden, Mickey Andrews, Bill Cowher, Dick LeBeau, Mike Tomlin, all iconic names. So if I didn't learn anything from them individuals, I wasted their time and my time. He used to tell us all the time, there's no such thing as style points. If you blow a team out, does it count as 2 wins or 1? It's 1. If you barely beat a team, is it 1 win or 2? Is it a half a win? It's a full win. So our job is to win. We got to win. But in that process, we're going to look good. We better look good from time to time. Every game ain't going to be our best game. Now, you guys know every column you write might not be your best column, but you better get your point across, right? Mm-hmm. We don't care anything about the labor pains. Your job is to deliver the baby. We don't want to hear nothing about how bad the pain was. You're supposed to deliver the baby. So that's all we want to see. And in our business, when you play the game of football, delivering the baby is winning. The labor pains is the process, the week of preparation, the 4 quarters, first, second, third, fourth. That's the labor pains. But at the end of the day, you better deliver this baby.
Well, B-Mac, I think you really encapsulated Mickey Andrews, just kind of how he had this simple but completely straight to the point way of looking at things. Because it reminded me, I would ask him a lot of times, well, why is this player is a 5-star and he's not starting over this guy? And Mickey's answer was always like, that wasn't my decision, that's his. Because those guys decide it on the field. I don't decide it. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. The last thing I want to ask you about with Mickey again, because we really enjoyed covering Mickey over the years. You talked about a great guy there too. And you'd never know it seeing him on the field. I saw him chew you guys out of practice and the things he would do. But, man, what a great guy off the field. And that's why all his former players love him. Because that's the kind he's a stand-up guy. But if you have one, if you can share a Mickey Andrews story with us, I know you have to have a good one, something you can share with us here that the fans would like to hear. You can tell us, B-Mac. Come on.
PG-13.
Yeah. I think it was maybe my first spring or my second spring at Florida State. And, I came in as, with a lot of accolades, and I didn't become a full-time starter until, like, my junior year. In between that time, I was, like, in the rotation, whatever the case may be. So that spring, I had a rough practice. The thing about Mickey Andrews, it seemed like he would pick a particular player just to be on him the entire day. And, like, it's my day. It's hot. You know how spring is in Tallahassee. It's humid. We got 27, 28 periods. And for the people who are watching me, when I say period, so that means each period consists of 3 or 4 minutes. So of practice time. So we had 3 or 4 minutes of 27 to 28 periods. So basically 28 times 3, 4 minutes, whatever the case may be, that would be the amount of time we'd be on the practice field. And those are long, drawn out processes. So he cussed me out throughout practice. I just had it rough. It was one of those days. And he told me, he said, McFadden, I thought you was going to be special. You a dog like the rest of them. I can't wait to run you away from here. And I just looked at Coach Andrews. I ain't had nothing to say because I was drawn out. I was tired. And he was like, you got something you want to say? I'm like, nah, Coach. And then I remember we had to run gases. And he just jumped on me. So one thing about Mickey Andrews, when we used to run gases, he used to always make things competitive, right? So gases for us will be sideline to sideline for people that are watching. Might not know what a gasser is. So we had to run from one sideline to the opposite side of the football field and back in a matter of 13, 14 seconds. So it's basically an all-out sprint. But the thing about Andrews is he would have his hat off and he'd say, on my hat drop, then you go, right? So if you jump off sides, that was a penalty. So for us, he would penalize us for jumping off side. He would take off a second or two. So instead of making it in 14 seconds, whatever the time was, you make it in 13 seconds. So he want to have you thinking at all times. And he felt like if you can think when you're tired, you can be a great player. Because adversity hits, you always think. You're always on top of your game. You know what you're supposed to do. So he used to always drill that in us, even during the end of practice and conditioning. So he said, on my hat, when I drop my hat, everybody go down, said hut, and he'll move his hat. The hat didn't drop. Yeah. So here go B-Mac. I done jumped offside. What are you doing? I just told you. He just cussing me out so tired. So he done took off a whole second. So now he go again. Down, said go. I done jumped offside again. He just cussing me out. That's your problem now. You're not thinking. So everybody mad at me. So finally we got it together. And I remember after the end of practice, he walked up to me. He told me, he said, you mad at me, huh? You want to cuss me? He just talking to me. I'm like, nah, Coach, I don't even cuss, but I want to say something to you, but I don't know what I want to say. He said, I know. He said, the same way how you feel, I want you to have that same attitude in between the lines. Can you give me that same attitude in between the lines? Because you're mad right now. That's your problem. You're not playing mad. You got to make it personal. You see how I made this for you personal, that you want to tell me something that you probably wouldn't say to me in any other app, in any other environment? Take it to that level when you're on the football field, because that's what they're going to do to you. The reason why you ain't playing because you don't want to play. Because if you want to play, you show me that you want to play. And he would tell us that in the classroom. If you're not going to class, you don't want to play football. Because if I can't trust you in the classroom to do what you're supposed to do, how can I trust you in the football field? They go hand in hand. And that's just the type of coach he was. He used to try to find a way to motivate us. And if he didn't motivate you, you wouldn't play.
My last question is, I ran into John Lilly, who was FSU's recruiting coordinator. Longtime FSU fans will remember Coach Lilly as recruiting coordinator and a tight ends coach. I talked to him years after he left Florida State. I think it was when he was at Georgia. Now he's, of course, at North Carolina. But he said to me one of his most heartbreaking recruiting stories, and you guys get all these people to go on spill the secrets on your guys' podcast. I'm wondering if you'll talk a little bit about Patrick. He said that when Patrick didn't come to Florida State, that was one of the most crushing things for him. How close was he to coming to Florida State? And what were those conversations like for you, since you guys are cousins?
He was real close to coming to Florida State. And I remember, because at one time he was a Miami commit. So he decommitted from Miami, and LSU kind of came about around like maybe October or something like that. And he loved Coach Andrews. He still loves Coach Andrews to this day. But what happened with that situation, he reached out to me and he said, man, if you want me to go to Florida State, I'll go to Florida State. He said, I'll go to Florida State, and at that time, he wore number 7 at Ely. He was like, I'm ready to rock the number 7. But I said, Pat, and me being a big cousin, they just know how the process is. I wanted him to go to Florida State, but I wanted him to go to Florida State because he wanted to go to Florida State wholeheartedly, right? And he was like, if you want me to go to Florida State, I'll go to Florida State. I said, well, I like hearing that, and I love the respect that you have for me, but I want you to go to Florida State because you want to go to Florida State. Because if something happens at Florida State with your career and it doesn't work out as you planned, you're going to feel some type of way with me saying, I want you to go to Florida State because I went to Florida State. I didn't think that was fair for him as a young player, especially as my family member, because I only wanted what was best for him. So that was the situation. So Florida State was definitely there, but the LSU mantra at that time kind of took over, with Pat. And remember at that time when he was coming out, Florida State was kind of, up and down a little bit. Not as down as it was the last few years currently, but, it was a bit, up and down a little bit. So LSU was at that time was starting to really, hit that light switch. And they just kind of like, they were going to highlight him. See, the thing about Pat that made Pat's decision to go to LSU easier than going to Florida State, when Pat went to LSU, they never had a Thorpe Award winner. You know what I mean? They never had an elite like defensive back that was nationally known. So he wanted to try to be the first to do something. At Florida State, you're going to always follow the steps of Deion Sanders and Terrell Buckley, the Leroy Butlers of the world, everybody. Now you got Jalen Ramsey, Derwin James, you know, some of these top flight guys that are now playing in the National Football League, because we had more of a extended tradition at the defensive back position. So that was more attractive to him. Some kids want to follow those legends that I just mentioned. Some kids might want to do something that could provide them the first to do so. Now, if you look at LSU, everything that he sought out to do, he did. The first Jim Thorpe Award winner, I think he became the first defensive player at LSU to win the Thorpe and the Benerick. And he made the number 7 a legendary number in the defensive backfield for LSU. So it all worked out well for him. But that question, I just didn't want him to go because I was the final say so. I didn't feel comfortable in doing that. I'm not that type of person. No,
that's good. That's great stuff. But I just, when he's telling me that, I'm like, man, you already think about Florida State's unbelievable DB tradition, DBU.
Oh my God!
Could you imagine if he had come here too? But that's awesome. It
worked out all right for him.
Yeah, it worked out well for him, and it's awesome that I think you gave him great advice.
Yeah, it all worked out well. And even with him going now, if he would have went to Miami, if you would have asked me that question, and Miami was the other school, we're going to Florida State. We don't really have any ties or issues with LSU. I was okay with that. But if that would have been Miami or Florida, no question. Who are the options? Because he told me it was LSU. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, LSU, okay. But if you would have said Miami or Florida State, nah, you're not going there. We're going to Florida State.
B-Mac, this has been great. We could probably talk for hours, and I think this spurs on another. We're going to bring you back just to have the DBU debate discussion. Speaking of LSU, because you see on social media, all those players and fans think they're DBU, and I know you have a different opinion on that one.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Gene, because on our podcast, the very first episode we had Tyrann Mathieu on, right? And then later in the year, we had Jamal on. So I kind of was outnumbered a lot, you know what I mean? So this whole DBU and things like that. And that was my story. I'm like, you guys as of late, you guys have been coming through in the clutch with a lot of well-known defensive backs, but there's not a lot of universities in college football that can say they were relevant at the defensive back position in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, right? And we've been relevant in every decade, to say the least. You know what I mean? And still is relevant to some degree. Those schools that we're talking about, LSU wasn't relevant in the 80s, especially the late 80s, the 90s. They just became relevant over the last decade, to say the least. But for us, it would be Florida State, and maybe you can throw in Ohio State. But when you think about Ohio State DBs in the 80s, and I'm a football guy. There's not a name that rings out to me from Ohio State. So when you look at it, Alabama, I know you may have, in the 90s, Antonio Lingham and the Shea Townsends of the world, but we still had elite guys in the 90s, you know what I mean? And in the 2000s. So that's my argument when it comes to DBU. And it's funny that you guys mentioned this as well. Our next episode, I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek about that we have coming on. That we will drop this Wednesday coming up. I don't know when you guys are releasing this, but it will be the next most recent episode of All Things Covered. We got Derwin James join us. So, get a chance to have, there we go, get a chance to have a former Nole on and Derwin James, to kind of help me out a little bit, because the last few episodes when we have LSU guys on, I'm outnumbered.
Yeah, and I really encourage anybody that's watching this to go listen to their podcast. And the great thing about podcasts is you can go back and listen to the old ones, and they've had some amazing ones. And man, I'm just so happy for you, B-Mac, because you're, again, going back to when we covered you, and Gene covered you back earlier than I did. But
I used to burn up his phone back in the old days when we had actual phones to talk to back in high school.
Hey, Gene, I got a question for you. I don't know if Ira was out there, but one of my very first times on the grass in the summer when Chris Winkie cursed me out because I was the receivers get off the line of scrimmage.
he was, I don't know if Ira knows that he was blowing Snoop up off the line of scrimmage, and Winkie's like, "What are you doing?" It's an All-American wide receiver. Don't knock him to the ground during, player work.
I want to let people know, man. I wasn't playing around, man. I want to let you guys know, man. I'm here to try to play. And when I got cursed out from Chris Winkie, I was so scared. I'm like, oh, shoot. Chris Winkie just cursed me out. I was letting everybody run past me after that.
That was awesome. I remember that. But, yeah, All Things Covered. Check that out. Man, I'm hitting the subscribe button right now, B-Mac, because I can't wait for that Wednesday episode. And all FSU fans, I encourage you it's free to subscribe. You can get it there. And do you also run those on YouTube or just on the podcast?
Man, listen, man, the YouTube has been phenomenal as well. I think it depends on to the preference of the listener if you want to watch us, because sometimes we do add video clips along with some of the things that we're talking about. You know, when Pat is talking about some things, like, I love being able to educate people. That's the good thing that I like about the podcast. You know, even though we have a script, we can go off the script at any given time, as you guys know. Just being able to educate certain things about the training, about techniques. You know, when we had DeAndre Hopkins on, you know, talking about some of the things he does in his route tree when he's running his routes. You know what I mean? So it's great to be able to have the option of being heard and seen. So just give us a shot. And like I said, don't just leave us a 5-star rating because, you know, you might be a bit biased, but actually leave a 5-star rating because you like what we provided. And give us some feedback as well, because there's always room to grow. You know, we're still newbies into this industry, but we just love having fun, man. We bring on everybody. We had Shaquille O'Neal on, you know what I mean? We had Fabulous on. So that's the name that I came about, because I thought about it. I'm like, you know, I don't want to just be generic and just only talk football. We want to cover everything. So,
but it's perfect because it also works because you guys did cover everything on the football field.
Exactly. That was my whole thought process, doing something that was relatable to what we do, what I did and what he's currently doing, but also to what we want to talk about. So the name came about, you know, thought about all things covered. I like that, all things. So we're gonna cover everything. So it's gonna be a pleasure. But like, we got Daryl James coming on, man, this week. So it should be a fun, cool episode. Make sure all the Florida State people tune in to us and let us know what you're gonna think. And then also too, I'm gonna have a lot more Florida State people on as well. You know, just kind of got to go through the Rolodex and just try to tap into every area as possible. Not just football. You know, you never know who we might bring on who's tied to Florida State to some degree.
Sounds good, B-Mac. You're doing fantastic work. Keep it up. And we'll be in touch, and I will be listening on Wednesday for that broadcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me once again, and hopefully I'll see you guys in person soon.
All right. Take care, B-Mac.
Yep.